Felicity Huffman could end up in prison for her part in the college admissions scandal. She's one of 13 parents who has agreed to plead guilty. She could face up to 20 years in prison, though prosecutors are going to recommend much less as part of her plea deal. Nevertheless, she might see prison time. And what is that like? For wealthy, high-profile inmates, how do they prepare for a life behind bars? Well, joining me now, John Fuller. He literally wrote the book on this subject. And John, you're the author of this book, Prison, an Insider's Guide to Life Behind Bars, and the 10 Prison Commandments. So let's be clear, you're not representing anyone in this case, but we have seen reports that these people are hiring people like you to figure out, how do I go from the Hollywood high life to prison? How do you even prepare someone for that?
Well, it's a mental mindset that one has to have first and foremost. But unfortunately, some of the people that they're reaching out to haven't spent time in prison. They may have been in a prison camp and spent 1 year in prison. However, they have no experience on what prison is actually like, whether it's a medium or high security prison. And if these celebrities are sentenced at the high end of the guidelines and receive 15 or 20 years, they will not be in a camp. So those who have spent a lot of money on these prison consultants, they're going to be in for a huge disappointment if they're sentenced at the upper end of those guidelines. And the adjustment is going to be extremely difficult because they're used to having things their way. They're used to conducting business day in and day out. They're used to eating the food that they're, accustomed to, in addition to using the phone a lot. And once you're in prison, particularly federal prisons, because this is a federal crime, you're only allotted 300 minutes per month. And most celebrities can go through that in a day.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, you actually have 10 prison commandments that you recommend. What would those be?
Well, we won't get into all of them, but
no, right.
minding your business would be minding your business would be at the top, along with not stealing and not snitching on anyone. And, some of these individuals have cooperated with the government. And so likely they filed a 5K1 motion, which will entitle them to a downward departure in the sentencing guidelines. And if inmates find out that they have actually filed these motions, it can be a really rough ride for them because they'll be labeled as a snitch and be an outcast, whether they're in a camp, a low, medium, or high security prison.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering. Is this like a white-collar prison, more like a summer camp, or are they in for a shock because they do have a target on their back? Maybe not for being a snitch, but for being a celebrity.
Yeah, absolutely, because when you think about it, of course, celebrity status will always bring some attention to you. But when you're labeled as a snitch, it doesn't matter whether you're wealthy, whether you're poor. It has no bearing. It's simply a coat that you're forced to wear from the perspective of your fellow inmates. You're one who should not be trusted, cannot be trusted. And it's a shame that most of these individuals have been told by their lawyers or these guys who have spent 1 year in prison, they're telling these individuals, oh, when you go to a camp, things are going to be just fine. You're going to have a peachy job. Just lay low. They're not telling them that or preparing them in a situation where they may move from a camp to a low in the event that they're caught stealing or doing something wrong. And so they'll be in for a rough ride, whether they're in a camp or in a low, in my opinion.
Well, of course, as you point out, being a snitch is terrible. What about a cheat? I mean, everybody else is in there for some kind of crime.
Yeah. The reality is that a hardcore drug dealer who's been in prison for a certain amount of years has worked his way, and he can now be eligible for a prison camp because maybe he has 8 years left on his sentence. And hypothetically speaking, if a celebrity goes into prison and they only have 2 months, they're still in a prison camp with someone who could have been incarcerated for 15 years. Well, they've done 10 years, so maybe they have 7 years left. They're not going to tolerate that behavior and that pompous attitude from these celebrities. And so they'll find themselves into a situation, whether they like it or not, because guys who have been in prison for a significant amount of time have zero tolerance for people who are whining and crying about what they have, what they used to have, what their lot in life was, what their role in this particular movie was. They don't care. They just want to finish their time and come home.
That's right. You know, I know that you've had some of these parents reach out to you. You're not representing them. But if you were, what's the one piece of advice you would give them if they head to prison?
Well, considering the crime that they have, I don't believe that this is the first crime that they've committed. Fortunately, you know, the wealthy who invest in these institutions, their children will go through to these colleges by a rites of passage. The rich have paid and taken a shortcut. And so these rich people who are going to prison now, they've lived deceit-and lives for quite some time. They have to deal with being honest now. And so I would get psychological help, get some counseling to figure out, how am I going to be honest moving forward? How do I tell the truth about a situation and still feel good about myself? Because their children are going to receive some backlash, likely by some of the students. Who knows what the situation will be like between the parents and their children once they're separated for quite some time. So they need help. Perhaps the parents and the children should go into some form of counseling prior to incarceration. That would be my suggestion.
John Fuller, really interesting. Thanks for being with us. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.